5 colleges have formed a national improvement team to work together to try to tackle some of the issues around retention and attainment in further education courses in Scotland. And together they are using the 3-step improvement methodology to give a bit of structure to the changes that they're trying to introduce to improve retention and lead to greater attainment for their students. There are 3 key questions that they ask as part of this methodological approach, and that is to be really clear about the aim, what they're trying to achieve, for which learners, by when, how they're going to know whether those changes are an improvement, and what are they going to use to measure the success of what they're doing. So how are they gathering data over time to show that the things that they're doing is really leading to better outcomes for their learners. Alongside these kind of big questions, they take a very systematic approach to testing their changes, and they use what's called the PDSA cycle to do that. So that involves planning what they're going to do, predicting what the outcome might be, doing the thing in the first place, so carrying out the change in the classroom context or within the service that they want to improve, gathering the data about what is happening when they're doing that so that they can then study that and understand the impact of that change against the measures that they've put in place. They can make a decision then as to whether or not they need to adapt that when they retest the change, whether they want to adopt the change because it has been so successful, or whether in fact that change should be abandoned. So those kinds of iterative cycles build up a lot of information and learning about what's working for which learners in which contexts. We've got some people now that are going to explain about what they've been doing in their own colleges and hopefully give you a flavour of the enthusiasm they have for this work.
The couple of days have been really quite engaging. It's been quite challenging. We're coming from different kind of mindsets in terms of how we would approach areas of improvement, and we've had a lot of work on different improvement methodology, and that in itself I think has been really, really helpful.
We used the PDSA model to take a very explicit look at certain aspects that we wanted to improve and encourage the teams to take a close and regular look at the impact of what they were doing, and that worked out through the year. So at the end of the year just past, we've seen improvement in overall success rates in both of those programmes by 17 and 21 percentage points respectively, so really marked improvements.
We spent a lot of time looking at PDSAs for each of the projects we've been involved in, and I think the end outcome of that really helped us to focus on what the measures would be, the measures of success for each of those projects. The cause and effect tool, process mapping and the force field analysis. We've probably used them across the college without those labels on them for many years. Part of that has helped us really to focus on the improvement measures, and that actually was a bit of a challenge for us initially, was actually identifying how we would measure success or failure in the initiatives that we were undertaking. In terms of where we've used it across all of the projects, and in the NC Creative Industries project, it really has helped us to identify some of those small changes that we know that we can now make in order to improve the potential for this project to be a success in the future.
We've been focusing really on driver diagrams and PDSA kind of templates to drive improvement forward. So we've had a real mix across the teams in terms of how they've used the PDSA approach. And I think that's been really beneficial because it's kind of given people a safe space to test things out in, and it's okay for something to be tested and for it not to work out. So that's been really good.
Well, in the main, we've used the driver model in order to clarify our thinking and get us from aim through to tests of change. And we found that very useful to help us with the thinking through of what we were actually doing, and also why were we doing it. I think that was really quite important. So we've used that, and we also used the PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act model for the tests of change. That was really useful because it did force us to think about our measurement, what were we doing, how were we doing it, and also to go back. And because of the paperwork, you have to go back and fill it in, so you have to revisit and think about things that might otherwise kind of slip away.
Retention and Attainment programmes we run for 2 years. We've had a number of different meetings about what we would want to be using going forward for the next couple of years. And we eventually settled on looking at some of the PIs that were in at NC level within creative industries, the performance indicators. Generally speaking, they'd been quite low up until last year, so we thought that would be good courses to use. That kind of ran in at the same time as us creating these NC Creative Industries courses, which allow students to choose their own units, SQA units that they want to do within the course. So what we were looking at really in terms of the methodology was, is students having the opportunity to choose their own course and to lead, in the choices that they've got for their course, would that improve PIs?
We'll be looking at our school-college partnerships, and we'll be looking at doing some tests of change. So we'll be looking at particular schools, particular course programmes, and particularly partnerships in terms of where we think we can make the best improvements and that we can test some of the changes that we can do. And the idea really is that we'll take what we've got back and form a larger group back in Edinburgh College to revamp the whole way and to try and kind of use the creativity and some of the improvement models that we can, not just in the school-college partnerships, but hopefully in a lot of our other improvement areas, and kind of, relook and revise the way that we do improvements and the way that we evaluate some of our work.
Taking the cause and effect tool back to the college is going to be very useful for documenting potential issues that might arise from certain areas within the project.
This is the first time we've been introduced to the cause and effect of the force field, so we're just getting our heads around that. But I think, as with the other tools, they're familiar in what we're asked to do. You always think about what works well, what doesn't, and what do we need to do to change it. What I like about the tools, it provides a bit of structure for teams when they're thinking about that, because they're dealing with a lot. They have busy teaching loads, a lot of pressures on them in the college sector, but we do ask them to take time out to consider what's happening on their programmes, to look at the data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, to take on board student views, to use their own professional judgment, to review their programmes and think about what might be improved, and these tools help with that.
The toolkits have been interesting to get to grips with, but I think we can really start to see the benefit of making use of those now.
We found the force field model worked best for us today. We're looking at how barriers to student funding can negatively impact student retention. This model has allowed us to reflect effectively on the driving and resisting factors.
It's a much more structured approach, and I think that's really helpful because it forces you to plan and think through before you're actually carrying something out.
What was particularly amazing for me was to see the internal workings of how all these decisions were made, and the processes, the internal processes of, okay, we have this goal, but how are we going to get there? And working backwards to see what all our starting points are. And just as I'm thinking, okay, so that's our starting point, the team that I work with and who I know really well from working in the college with them will maybe say, oh, actually, no, we've got to do this first, and then we've got to do this first. And it's been really interesting to get that insight, because as a student, you don't get that.
It's a great opportunity to be able to take time away to be able to reflect and to be able to look at new methodology, work with other colleges, get a chance to see what approaches that other people are doing, and just to be able to kind of build that network to be able to drive improvements and just be able to take that time out that we don't often get, and it'll give us the kind of impetus and also the backing of our executive team to be able to kind of drive forward the changes and the support of the Scottish Government to do that as well.